Hello, friends, and welcome back to North of the Fray. My name is Tanya, and I am so glad that you are here with me today. If you're new to the channel, welcome to this community where we explore narcissistic behaviors through a biblical lens. For those of you who continue to press play, I want to thank you for your continued support, and I want you all to know that I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future discussions here on this channel. And remember, liking and subscribing to videos that you like on any channel helps to grow that community and spreads the important messages. And so I thank you again in advance. Today, I want to talk about how narcissistic abuse, manifests and impacts lives. I am sharing a PowerPoint here, and hopefully it's coming through clear on your end. I think it's just the teacher and me. I have to put something together, right? So you can see it. But I want to share some things with you today that I hope are helpful along on your journey. Remember, narcissism is insolent pride. That's what the Bible refers to it as. It's a spirit that's unforgiving, uncaring, unloving, and extremely prideful. These are the types of people that God turns over to a reprobate mind, because no matter how much you try to help them, they just continue to exploit others and continue to hurt others. They don't care about anyone but themselves, and they steal all of the joy away from every single person that they touch. And so the Bible encourages us in Numbers, and I have videos about this too, to just move away from people like this. Move away from the wicked. Get away from them. When people are displaying this type of behavior, you are not obligated to fellowship with them in any way. And so don't pin yourself or your life to their lives. And I know it can get more complicated when you share children or you've been married to them for some time, and that can get complicated. What I can encourage you to do is to pray. God always makes a way. So pray. And I'm trying to go here on the screen. Before I get started, if you or someone else you know is struggling with any type of abuse, any type of domestic violence, because psychological abuse, which narcissists engage in every single day, is abuse. And so I want you to use the number on the screen to reach out for help. I know we talk about these subjects, but there's nothing like tangible help, people who are available to really help you. And so it's my prayer that if you have to call that number, that there's someone really on the other end who can help you with your situation if you are in need of help and in need of to escape. All right, so let's start by understanding exactly what narcissistic abuse is. For one, it is abuse. It's abusive, it's wrong, it's evil, it's hateful. Okay. And at its core, it's a pattern of manipulative and harmful behavior that's used by someone with a narcissistic mindset so that they can control, demean, or exploit anyone around them. Everyone's fair game to a narcissist, right? So this abuse can show up in different areas of life. And today I'm going to talk about the verbal, financial, spiritual, physical, and sexual. So it's important to recognize, I'm going to click on this screen here again, to recognize these patterns so that we can address them and find healing. Now, the Bible does not explicitly mention narcissism. It doesn't say that word. But remember, in Ecclesiastes, he said there's nothing new under the sun. There's no behavior that's new. There's nothing new. And as we live and get older, we understand that to be true. Nothing new. And so narcissistic behavior is not new. It's just popping up in pop psychology with a different name. But the Bible has a lot to say about pride, manipulation, and oppression, which are traits that are often defined or that often define narcissistic behavior. So Proverbs 21:24 to me is a quick description. I encourage you to read all of Proverbs 21. It will explain to you exactly what a scoffer is. But the Bible talks about a proud and haughty man They call this person a scoffer. This can be a man or a woman. Please don't get it twisted. Okay, so this person, the Bible refers to as a scoffer or a mocker, depending on which translation you're reading. And so he acts with arrogant pride, or some translations will say insolent pride. And so this person is very haughty, arrogant, self-consumed, and the list will go on in Proverbs 21 about how a description of a narcissistic person. I encourage you to read it. So now, narcissistic abuse takes on a lot of different forms, but each one of them is rooted in emotional and psychological manipulation. These behaviors aim to control, as I said earlier, belittle, and break down the victim's sense of self. So I want to examine the different types of abuse and how they manifest and how they connect to emotional and psychological harm. So let's go to the first one. Scroll here on my screen. Verbal abuse. Words have the power to heal or harm, and verbal abuse uses them to instill fear or diminish self-worth through name calling, yelling, and threats. This type of abuse leaves lasting emotional wounds as the victim begins to internalize the negative messages, often believing that they are true. Over time, these verbal attacks can erode confidence and self-esteem, making it even harder for the victim to break free from the toxic relationship. Here's an example. A narcissistic boss, okay, because we can deal with them in any area of life, family member, boss, married to them, dating them, a child, a parent, okay? But let's talk about a narcissistic boss that might regularly berate an employee in front of others, saying things like, "You're incompetent and lucky to even have a job here." Over time, the employee may feel humiliated and begin to doubt their abilities, even when others recognize their value. All right. So let's look at the biblical insight. Proverbs 18:21, the tongue has the power of life and death. Verbal abuse weaponizes words, misusing their power in ways that deeply harm the soul, creating a ripple effect of pain that impacts the victim's mental and spiritual well-being. And so when narcissists are verbally abusing someone, they are going against God's requirements for how we treat others. And God has already warned us to be careful with our tongues because the power of life and death are on them. And so we sometimes say words don't hurt, but words do hurt. Words do matter. And verbal abuse is not okay. Okay, so now let's go to financial abuse. Number 2. This form of control restricts access to money or resources, trapping the victim in dependency. By denying financial autonomy, the abuser ensures the victim cannot gain independence, often leaving them unable to leave the abusive relationship. Financial abuse can manifest in ways that extend beyond withholding money, such as sabotaging the victim's ability to work or forcing them to justify every expense. Here's an example. So you have a narcissistic spouse who might insist on controlling all of the bank accounts. They start with this mess early. Okay, what's theirs is theirs and what's yours is theirs, right? And so they want to control all the bank accounts, all the credit cards, and want to put the victim on a strict allowance, but they can spend whatever they like. And they demand receipts for every purchase. And the money they give that's an allowance is something that's really insulting. I visited a friend one time who was married to a narcissistic man, and he gave her $5 to feed 3 children on their McDonald's day. And so when I was in town, I had to keep buying food for her and her kids when we went out because he would not give her money. He told her to make it work, figure out how to make it work for what it is that you need or don't go. So he was restricting, abusing, and controlling her with money. So if the victim spends even just a small amount outside of what's approved, they may face verbal berating or even complete financial cutoff. The abuser might also sabotage the victim's career by interfering with their work schedule, or discouraging them from pursuing higher paying opportunities to ensure that the victim remains financially reliant. So this very prideful spirit is also very envious. And so if you are doing better than a narcissist and you're with them, you're going through hell. You're going through even worse hell than if you were just docile. Okay, because they don't want to see you do better in any capacity, be it a friend or whatever. They're always competing with you. There's always this competition in their mind. And so they need you to be beneath them, or at least for them to see it that way. Here's the biblical insight. Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth will only come to poverty. That's Proverbs 22:16. So financial abuse is a form of oppression that contradicts God's principles of justice and generosity, exploiting power to control rather than provide freedom and dignity. All right, let's go to number 3, spiritual abuse. Now, I've spoken a lot about this on this channel, y'all. Anyway, I'm going to try to stick to what I have written down to say, but this is one that just really gets me. In these churches, folks need to wake up. You got these pastors and leaders in the churches doing God knows what, doing whatever they want. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting to see people turn their heads, but they're turning their heads because they've got so much trash in their lives that they don't want to be exposed for. So they're not going to expose someone else. And so it's just a pot of dung, if you ask me. That's in most churches today. And so I'm really disgusted by what I see going on in churches and how I see terrible people celebrated who call themselves pastors. So anyway, I'm going to get off that horse. But twisting religion or scripture to manipulate others is a particularly insidious form of abuse, as it weaponizes faith to control and silence victims. This type of abuse exploits a person's trust in spiritual authority, creating confusion and guilt while undermining their ability to discern genuine truth. Victims are often made to feel that questioning the abuser's actions is equivalent to defying God, leaving them trapped in a cycle of fear and submission. And let me tell you, you better ask all the questions that you can. And if they get upset by it, then there's your answer. You need to leave, okay? Because no one should feel insulted or feel upset and angry because you're asking questions about some questionable behavior that they have. But here's an example. A narcissistic pastor might preach that congregants must tithe an exorbitant amount to prove their faith, even if it causes financial hardship. When questioned, the pastor might say, "If you don't trust me, you don't trust God's plan," implying that obedience to their personal authority is a direct reflection of the person's spiritual devotion. This manipulation not only strains the victim's finances, but also distorts their understanding of faith, replacing trust in God with dependence on the abuser. I see this a lot in churches, especially the money come now churches. I can't even think of what they call. My brain is going now, but in churches like Creflo Dollar, let me just call out a person or two, okay? And then you got what's the guy with the really crazy looking eyes? I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, all of these pastors, prosperity preachers, that's what they're called. Sorry, y'all, I just kind of had a brain fart there for a minute because I'm not sticking to my script. But the prosperity gospel, man, is so dangerous for people. When people can't turn their lights on and you're making them feel like they need to put money in a pot and they can't feed their children, you should be giving them money, right? Hunger, when there's someone in your church that's hungry, whose car broke down on its way to get to your church, and you're asking these people for money, it's sick. And so I want you guys to know that this is a sickness, it's a mental sickness, and you need to move away from it. Here's the biblical insight. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. That's Matthew 23, verse 4. Okay, they're not willing to sacrifice the way that you sacrifice, but they won't tell you that. Okay, they'll lie and say that they did it and that's how they got rich, and it's not true. Spiritual abuse burdens people with guilt and fear, directly opposing the freedom and grace offered through faith. Jesus called out such hypocrisy, emphasizing that genuine spiritual leadership uplifts and liberates rather than oppresses. If you feel oppressed in a house where you want to worship God, leave. Okay, number 4, physical abuse. Physical intimidation or violence is used to instill fear and assert dominance, leaving lasting emotional and psychological scars. This form of abuse not only causes immediate harm, but also creates a climate of terror where the victim feels perpetually unsafe, even in their own home. Physical abuse is often accompanied by emotional manipulation, as the abuser may apologize profusely afterward or blame the victim, further entrenching the cycle of abuse. And here's an example. A narcissistic partner might escalate arguments by punching walls, throwing objects, or physically restraining the victim to intimidate them. In one instance, the partner might grab the victim forcefully during an argument, saying, "You made me do this. If you weren't so difficult, I wouldn't have to act this way, excuse me." And so over time, the victim becomes conditioned to walk on eggshells, avoiding confrontation or self-expression out of fear of triggering another outburst. This environment of fear and control isolates the victim, making it harder for them to seek help or escape. Please use the number that was on the screen if you are experiencing any type of abuse, especially physical abuse. No one has the right to put their hands on you. No one has the right to control your life. And so if you're feeling controlled and like you are out of control and you don't know what to do, reach out to someone. Here's the biblical insight. The Lord examines the righteous, but the wicked, those who love violence, he hates with a passion. I have a video on here that talks about how God hates narcissists. He hates the behavior of narcissism. He hates it. And he hates them when they are violent and mentally and physically abusing other people. God does not like that. Violence is a stark rejection of God's call to love, peace, and justice. Physical abuse not only breaks the body, but also crushes the spirit, contradicting the divine purpose of relationships as places of safety and support. And now for another really sensitive one, sexual abuse. And I've talked about this separately in length before as well. So sexual abuse exploits intimacy as a weapon, using it to exert control, manipulate, or punish the victim. It often intertwines physical, emotional, and psychological harm, leaving deep wounds that affect the victim's sense of safety, self-worth, and autonomy. This form of abuse is particularly damaging because it violates the trust and vulnerability that should define healthy intimacy, replacing love with fear and coercion. Here is an example. A narcissistic spouse might insist on certain sexual acts the victim is uncomfortable with, dismissing their objections by saying, "If you don't do this, it proves you don't love me." The abuser may withhold affection or intimacy as punishment for perceived failures or to reinforce power dynamics in the relationship. For instance, they might say, You don't deserve to be close to me until you prove you can make me happy, creating a toxic cycle where the victim feels they must comply to gain approval or avoid rejection. Over time, the victim's sense of agency over their own body is eroded, leaving lasting trauma. And here is the biblical insight. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed in spirit. Sexual abuse inflicts profound emotional and spiritual pain, often leaving victims feeling broken and alone. This scripture reminds us that God is near to those who have been hurt, offering comfort, healing, and restoration. True intimacy aligns with God's design for relationships, characterized by love, mutual respect, and care, never by coercion or harm. Through His grace, healing is possible, and survivors can find hope and renewal in His steadfast love. Please be encouraged. So, friends, if you're experiencing any of these forms of abuse, please know that it is time to leave. It's time to find a way to go. It's time to move away. I provided the number earlier on the screen, and it's always in the description box on any videos that I post. I hope you'll use it. Healing begins by recognizing the abuse and seeking help. This might involve, if not calling that number, reaching out to a trusted friend, a counselor, or a spiritual leader. It's also essential to set boundaries, something Jesus Himself modeled when He distanced Himself from those who sought to harm Him. Remember, healing is a journey, and God walks with you every step of the way. So let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts, your questions, or even your experiences in the comments. And if today's discussion spoke to you, please share it with someone else. Someone else might need to hear it. And until next time, I want you guys to stay strong, stay grounded, most importantly, stay north of the fray. Goodbye.